Transposition, transposing. What is it? How do we do it? I'll start by saying that I'm not going to get into the why of it. I think that there are a lot of very smart music folks out there on the internet that can provide a really great answer to that frustrating question of why is a C on one instrument not a C on another instrument? Why can't everything just kind of be the same? There is a reason for that, and there are folks that can provide a really good answer to that, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm also going to not get into every little bit of transposition or transposing. Again, there's a lot of really great information out there, and it can get kind of complex. So this video is just for kind of a quick, well, fairly quick, but an introduction to transposing, maybe just to kind of get us started transposing for the first time, maybe in school band or something like that. So, transposition, like I think a lot of aspects of music, really comes down to intervals. Intervals meaning the distance between the notes in a melody, the space between the notes. I think intervals can make as much of a difference to a melody or to harmony or to a song as the actual notes themselves. That's the reason why I can play Happy Birthday starting on a C, but I can also play Happy Birthday starting on a G. And the reason that those two sound the same, the reason that the song is still there, is because I'm keeping the distances between my notes the same. So even though I'm playing actual different notes, I can still play the song as long as I keep those intervals. Intervals are very, very important. They're very, very important to transposition because I basically just now transposed that melody. And what I mean by that is I took a melody, I took a part, and I shifted it. Now, in addition to keeping the notes the same from one note to the next, transposition also means that we make that shift the same all the way across. Whether it's shifting up or shifting down, we're moving an entire part, an entire melody, by one interval. Now, what is that one interval? Well, it depends on the instruments that you're playing. So we'll use one example later on. How do we measure these intervals? How do we measure intervals? There are two most common ways to describe and measure distances between the notes. One, which you may have heard just in movies or in class or something like that, is actually using numbers, like a third or a fourth. These two notes are a third apart. That melody drops down a fifth, or even, can you take that part an octave down? So those are all examples of kind of using numbers, numerals, to describe intervals, distances between the notes. I'm also not going to deal with that one today. I'm just going to talk about the other way that we can measure, which is related, which is half steps. You can say, oh, play that note and then go 4 half steps up, or the next note is 3 half steps below. That way, I think, is an easier introduction to being able to kind of shift melodies. Half steps are what, for the most part, in Western European variations of the instruments that we use, half steps are really kind of the smallest distance that we have between notes. There are a lot of really amazing styles of music all around the world that I'll actually use even smaller distances. But for most Western European music that we're playing in band class, the smallest distance is a half step. So an example of a half step would be a C to a C sharp. there's a very slight change in the sound, where the note just gets a little bit higher from C to C sharp. A really general explanation of half steps is just like that. Yeah, a letter to then that letter's sharp or flat. It makes a big difference, right? Like if I change a melody by just one half step, it can affect quite a bit. You know, if I'm playing at a wedding and I'm about to play Here Comes the Bride, and I'm off by a half step, things just got a little weirder. So the half steps are the smallest measurement, but they do make a very, very big difference. And I think for starting out for transposition, thinking about distances between the notes in terms of half steps is the easiest way. We're mostly just moving between our natural versions of the notes and then the flats and sharps themselves. So if you move through them and hit every sharp and every flat, you should be able to just move by half steps. There are two places that you kind of need to look out. You can see them on a piano, and people that take piano may be more familiar with this. But the distance between a B and a C is a half step. There's no flat or sharp relationship there. I mean, there is, but we're not going to get into that. For the ease of counting for now, just remember that B to C, the basic notes, counts as a half step. The other place that we have a situation like that, where it's two normal letters moving next to each other and they're only a half step distance apart, is E to F. So the distance between B and C is a half step. The difference between the distance from E to F is a half step. So those are the two places to be careful. Everywhere else, G to a G sharp, B to down to a B flat, those are all half steps apart. So once we kind of figure out how we can count our half steps, then we can take a melody and transpose it. I'm going to skip a little bit and just use an example. If I have an alto saxophone part and I want to try to change and transpose that alto saxophone part to become a tenor saxophone part. Like I want to play that alto saxophone melody on my tenor saxophone. And I'll just provide the answer here for our purposes. I need to move all of the notes in that melody up 5 half steps. So if I have an alto saxophone melody that starts on a G, I move from G to G sharp, 1 half step. G sharp to A, 2 half steps. A to B flat or A to A sharp, 3 half steps. A sharp to B or B flat to B, 4 half steps. And then B to C, 5 half steps. So if I have a melody for an alto saxophone that starts on a G, if I want to play that on tenor, I start on a C. Something else to keep in mind, when I'm doing that counting, that distance counting to find the 5 half steps distance, I'm not counting the notes themselves. I didn't go G, G sharp, A sharp or B flat, B, C, right? I didn't count the notes themselves. I counted the distance between G to G sharp to A to A sharp or B flat. So hopefully that makes sense too, because that can also be why we end up transposing something incorrectly. We're counting the notes themselves instead of the distance between them. So that is at least a very, very, very basic introduction to transposing